This episode of Bullet Heaven was made with a copy of the game provided by Einen Games. I could talk about how we checked out Dariusburst Chronicle Saviours and all of its DLC back in Series 7, or how its limited edition had amazing models, or how the Vita version is hella tight, or how the PSP original Dariusburst is probably the most impressive shmup on the console, but no. We're gonna take a look at some katakana because as it turns out, this game is pronounced differently than you might think. It's something I noticed when I was putting the PSP version away. Dariusburst, I said playfully, but then I saw what was actually written. Dariusburst. And yeah, I get it, it's hard to suddenly just flip to a whole new way of saying it, but it had been that way the entire time and I hadn't noticed it. And it's not a bad transliteration because there's more than enough flexibility in the Japanese language for what it looks like.
Darius. Darius.
So yeah, I'm gonna go with how it was meant to sound based on how it was written this whole time. It's a planet, after all, and that's all I need. In this episode of Bullet Heaven, we're taking a look at Dariusburst Another Chronicle EX Plus on the Nintendo Switch. Dariusburst Another Chronicle EX Plus, or ACEX Plus for short going forward, is an enhanced port of the 2011 expanded version of the 2010 arcade version of Dariusburst, which itself is a port of the PlayStation Portable version which saw release by Taito in Japan in 2009. Released on July 27, 2021 by Einen Games for Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 in the West, ACEX Plus is largely the same as Another Chronicle EX, but without the plus, as was found in Dariusburst Chronicle Saviours on PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, and Windows PC. True, it lacks the console-friendly 16:9 aspect ratioed CS mode and its 200 plus stages. And yes, what's here is largely in the CS release as well. But there's also stuff that sets ACEX Plus apart, and may yet be worth another dip for fans, especially those with a Nintendo Switch. Let's take a closer look. The gameplay in Dariusburst ACEX Plus is, by and large, exactly the same as what we've seen in CS, which we took a look at in Bullet Heaven number 143. Sporting typical Heart 8 control and an easy-to-handle button setup, controlling the Silverhawk in Dariusburst is easy enough to do. Given the length of the play area, and given that enemies will appear from all sides, being able to flip the Silverhawk around is a handy ability to have. Players can do so simply by pressing the R button, with the Y button handling both the Silverhawk's main shots and bomb attacks, B to activate the burst attack, and L to deploy a fixed burst to the field. Dishing the pain is easy enough to do. Using the burst attack properly will take some getting used to. A gauge under the player's ship will display the power available for the burst attack to be used. A regular burst attack will deplete the player's power very quickly, but a fixed burst will last much longer. When a fixed burst is deployed, its direction can also be changed in relation to the player's position to it. Angling the burst can take care of all kinds of enemies if done correctly, and multiple players can even merge 2 or more for an extra boost in fixed burst power. The burst can also be used to counter large beams from enemies and bosses, but some are more finicky than others. We found that the easiest ships to counter with were the Genesis and Murakumo Silverhawks. Legend bursts and necks, for example, need pinpoint accuracy, and even then, there are allegedly issues with getting the counter to even trigger, even with split-second timing. When the power gauge depletes, it can be filled back up by taking out more enemies and their shots. Of course, a burst attack can also often be extended while taking out huge swaths of enemies, which definitely helps in scoring, which we'll take a look at shortly. Up to 4 players can take on the game's myriad modes and stages with varying conditions and stage sets for each, much like the version of EX found in Dariusburst CS. Original EX, and Chronicle are once again present as they were in EX Vanilla, but this time around, the event mode is actually accessible. Players also have the option to take on the game with infinite lives. This allows players to learn the game's ins and outs, but scores won't be recorded. A large expanded assortment of Silverhawks is also now available in ACEX Plus, which can be used in all modes, with the exception of those stage sets with ship restrictions. The Legend Burst, Next, Origin, Second, Gaiden, Assault, Formula, and more are all selectable right out of the gate, and of them, the newly added Murakumo Silverhawk was immediately our favorite thanks to its awesome flexible burst attack. There's a Silverhawk here for everyone, and figuring out which works best is half the fun. Players will power up their main guns with red orbs, their bombs with green orbs, and shields with blue. A small matrix for each player will fill in for each collected orb, and the player's power will upgrade when enough are collected. Oftentimes, enemy formations and other destructibles will have an enemy or object that will be the same color as the power-up dropped. Additionally, a gold orb can be collected to destroy all popcorn enemies while heavily damaging larger foes. Enemy shots can also be cancelled out by player shots of the same type, adding a touch of balance to the game on the whole. Original and Original EX challenges the player in taking on a number of branching 3-stage sets. A total of 6 stages are accessible in any one run, but progression only allows for 3 to be played. Each final area gives the player a different ending, and between Original and Original EX, a total of 10 exist. While this encourages replay, these sessions end up feeling extremely short, and regardless of whether the player succeeds or fails, game over will occur, forcing the player back to the title screen. For players looking to quickly get back into the game, having to navigate back to the mode they were just in as frequently as is required is obtuse at best and annoying at worst. In an arcade setting, the short play sessions would feel like a bit of a ripoff unless the same credit could be carried over to another run. But in a home setting without the dread specter of repeat credits needing to be spent to play again and again, it works really well for short bursts of play. The real meat and potatoes to ACEX Plus is going to be the Chronicle Mode. Once again, thousands of stages are accessible for players to take on and unlock with others from around the world. As more stage sets are cleared, more will become available. Players who complete a set are immortalized when it is achieved, and other players can then work to beat the high score set in that cell. All kinds of weapon and ship conditions, difficulties, and challenges await the player looking to rid the galaxy of the Belsar threat. And while these stages and their bosses are going to be heavily reused, there are enough here to keep players busy for a very, very long time. There are even stages that require 2, 3, or even 4 players in order to even take them on. Of course, since all kinds of players from all walks of life have access to the same virtual cabinets, contributions can still be made regardless of any one player's social situation. Finally, we have the newly restored Event Mode, which features all kinds of extra score and time attack challenges both from actual real-world Game Center events held in Japan, as well as stages made exclusively for ACEX+. These challenges can be punishing, but they're definitely fun to play. With such an extensive amount of gameplay at the player's fingertips, whether playing alone or with friends, Dariusburst Another Chronicle EX is a prime game to keep in anyone's permanent Switch rotation at least. But there is a bit of an issue with it all, and that's the aspect ratio. Because ACEX Plus is a 32:9 aspect ratio game, it is going to be heavily letterboxed when the whole playfield is displayed. It's also not as clear as, say, the PlayStation 4 and Steam versions of EX found within CS. There is a concession though. Players can press the ZL button to fill the whole screen at the cost of half of the horizontal view. This is similar to how Darius 2 was handled on the Sega Saturn. The problem is that the playfield shifts dynamically based on the player's horizontal position, which can be very disorienting. It's definitely easier to pick out and avoid bullets during more crowded sequences and bosses, but it's just so jarring, not to mention that the screen scroll will make approaching enemies appear to move much faster than they actually are. It's unfortunate, though obvious, that ACEX Plus does not support a multi-screen or ultra-wide mode as CS did on Steam. Perhaps if a Steam version is made available, it could be done. However, since ACEX Vanilla is already there in CS, there would be less incentive to grab this one on Steam. The PlayStation 4 version of ACEX Plus is a tad superfluous as well, given that CS, and by extension ACEX Vanilla, is on PlayStation 4 as it is. As such, this is a much more important release for the Nintendo Switch than any other platform, though trophies always add a nice touch of replay. So yes, essential for Darius fans on Switch, but players' preference for PS4. Scoring high is primarily going to be achieved using burst attacks to take out large swaths of enemies through each stage. A multiplier of up to 96 times can be applied to formation kills using the burst attacks available to the player, and each stage has all kinds of opportunities to exploit. Silver orbs also make a return, and we've made a discovery since our last Dariusburst videos. The score a player will get is dependent on where in the circular motion the orb is. It'll take practice to really get it down, but it's definitely a neat mechanic. As was the case in CS, each stage also features a stage end bonus that is dependent on the number of shields left in the player's Silverhawk and the amount of time taken. While online scores can be uploaded and compared to high scores set by other players in various modes, one neat aspect to ACEX Plus is the ability to track the player's score in real time versus a ghost. This can either be the player's own ghost, or based on the current worldwide leader. These values are found in the top right-hand corner of the screen in large, bold numerals. It's a neat feature, and one that score chasers are bound to enjoy having at their disposal. By and large, the presentation in Dariusburst ACEX Plus is solid. Here's the good news. Freedom isn't in the game. Yes, I was probably way harsher with my opinions in 146 than I should have been, but I've given it a solid shake. I've listened to it on Spotify, and the verdict is still the same. I still hate that song. I hate it! The soundtrack in Dariusburst in general is split. Some are haunting and sound amazing, perfect for the atmosphere and setting. Others are just annoying. But some of the best tracks also make a return here, and yeah, they do it for me. The visuals are not especially impressive compared to a lot of modern 3D shooting games, and even some 2D ones for that matter, but they get the job done well enough. Of course, the iconic bosses, 40 in all, feature excellent design. Unlike the CS release though, ACEX Plus features the pre-rendered arcade track sequence, which is a great addition. Add to it all a simple but effective menu system and the visuals win. Mostly. Again, the Switch version does not seem to be as clear as it could be, leading us to believe that it's actually running at 720p even docked. The aspect ratio also makes for a very squinty time, especially in handheld mode, but it still works well enough. So how does Dariusburst Another Chronicle EX Plus stack up? Let's take a look. All in all, the control scheme in ACEX Plus works very well. It's hard to see and avoid so many small bullets with the super narrow aspect ratio though, and things get awkward quick when zoomed in. There's no denying that this is a tough game. I'm looking at you, great thing. But to be honest, it's made more difficult than it ought to be due to such a hard-to-see playfield. There is no shooter on the Switch with near as many stages available to players as ACEX Plus. On the PS4, only CS tops it. The visuals aren't exactly top of the line, but they're definitely no slouch either. Excellent boss design shines through, and some of the stages look pretty great. Some of the music is awesome, while most is good to meh, with a few awful tracks still present. But no freedom, so that's a definite plus. The sound effects work well. Because it lacks the CS mode, and because of various issues like burst counter not really working with some ships, ACEX Plus takes a bit of a hit with ingenuity. But the addition of all of the event mode stages, the Murakumo Silverhawk, and the awesome online virtual cabinets do a good job of making up for it. It's easy to say that ACEX Plus seems expensive for being a game that lacks a whole mode from the PS4, Vita, and PC versions of Dariusburst CS, but given that only a couple hundred stages from thousands aren't present, yeah, its moderate price of about $40 is a non-issue. It still has excellent value, especially on Switch. That said, it's still considerably less expensive than CS is, especially on PlayStation 4. You know what, I didn't think we needed to review this one, but to be honest, once I got playing it, there was really no turning back. It's great to have Dariusburst ACEX on the go. It has its drawbacks though, especially in handheld or tabletop mode on the Switch, but by and large, and especially in the case of the Switch version, Dariusburst ACEX Plus is definitely worth playing. If you want even more value, Dariusburst ACEX Plus is also included with G-Darius HD in the Darius Cosmic Revelation set available from Strictly Limited. Links in the description below. Darius Cosmic Collection was pretty great when we took a look at it back in Series 12, and Darius Cosmic Revelation is going to be fantastic. But we also got an immense Space Invaders release this month too. Stay tuned for a full teardown of the Space Invaders Invincible Collection Limited Edition coming soon. In the meantime though, we have another 5-game roundup coming soon on the next episode of Bullet Heaven. We'll see you all in the next episode.
Super Darius, Dariusburst, G Darius, Darius Gaiden, Darius 2, Darius Force, Darius Twin, Darius Plus, Darius Alpha.